cloud, right? Got to the cloud. Okay. Yesterday we covered environment setup and basic syntaxes on how to write a basic Java program and what are the rules and regulations for creating variables and what are the what is an array. But even if you don't understand what is an array at this moment, don't worry about it. We'll learn it in advance in next chapters. Okay, simple Java program we learn how to execute and how to create comments and everything. Comments won't be executed as part of the application, but the lines that are not commented will execute. So that's the whole thing. So now you have a blank lines for comment, right? So line containing only white space, possibly with a comment, is known as blank line. Like, what is inheritance, right? So in Java, it it says like object-oriented principles. Let me go to the next chapter, then we can start what it is. Okay. So object-oriented principles. Object-oriented principles are, there's a whiteboard here. So object-oriented principles are called as polymorphism, inheritance, encapsulation, abstraction, classes, objects, and instance, and method and message parsing. So far we learned the first topic is class, and the next thing is object, and the next thing is instance. Objects and instance. Object is nothing but an instance. Method, class contains variables and methods. We use methods to operate on properties. That is the basic thing that we learned until yesterday. Now we need to know the meaning of polymorphism, inheritance, encapsulation, abstraction, right? So if you don't know the actual meaning of this word in English, right? If you don't know the actual meaning of English word polymorphism, Google it. Condition of occurring several different forms, right? This is a meaning. So one can perform differently in different situations, right? Occurrence of different forms among the members of population or colony in the life cycle of individual organism. So people act differently in a different situation, but you are the same person, right? So one person behaving differently at different situations is called polymorphic behavior. Okay. That, as I said, like yesterday, Java can handle real world simulation of objects. That means like if you have a car, you can program and simulate the car. You can program a student, you can program an account, you can program. So because of this behavior of object handling or instance handling, Java became so popular. Means banking applications, business applications, all the applications were handled properly by Java. Before Java, it was not completely handled properly because everything was a method oriented, not object oriented. It was procedural oriented. So everything was a method based. But once C++ introduced object, it became so popular, but complexity of C++ pointers concept leads to Java development. Java helped people to develop the applications robust, very fast, so that Java became so popular. If some other application language comes in future to develop the applications in fast time, then people go for that. And it should be easy implementation, and within no time you should be able to develop the application. That is the reason Java is popular. So one of the features of Java is polymorphism. That means once you create an object, object can be a method, object can be an instance, right? So it can behave differently at different situations. So actual definitions are very important, right? Actual definitions are very important. Like yesterday, I talked about class. What is a class? Anyone? Can you give me a definition of a class? Who can give me a definition of a class from yesterday's session? Anyone? What is a class? I want one sentence definition, one line definition. Preeti, what is a class? Hello, Preeti. No. Santan, what is a class? Shruti, what is a class? If you guys don't speak, I cannot actually take the class today. Maybe when you can speak, I can take the class. Because there is no interaction. You guys don't get it because you might be watching like a movie, and then once you go home, you forget everything, and then you throw away your laptops or phones. I want you guys to tell me so that I know that you guys are learning something, so that I can continue to next step. After 1.5 months later, and if I realized or learned that you guys don't learn anything, you guys it's not useful.
So,
what is a class?
Yeah, class is a blueprint, like it's a template for creating objects.
Okay, what it contains?
It contains, it contains object.
Contains objects. So that means you didn't read it all. A class is a blueprint or a template that you can create objects from, and it contains variables and methods, and you use methods to operate on the variables. That is the whole definition. If you don't learn the definition, then you cannot pass the interview. You need to depend on somebody to help you. That is not right. Anyway, I won't talk about it. So polymorphism. You saw what is polymorphism, and now inheritance. Right? What is inheritance? Anyone in general term? What is inheritance? This one. What is inheritance? What is general meaning? Google it if you don't know.
Where some characteristics can be derived from the parent, or where we derive some instances to the object, like where we can inherit some things from the parent class.
Okay. So actually, I opened the screen earlier. I asked what is a class, right? It is visible to you guys, correct? This one is visible to you guys, the definition. A class can be defined as a template or a blueprint that describes the behavior or state that the object of its type support. Okay, don't get panicked when somebody talks to you, when somebody asks you. Try to be polite, but don't get panicked. Even if you don't know, you say don't know, or you can learn it later. And then you tell them right away, I don't know right now, I can learn it and tell you. That way, what happens is you build the confidence so that whatever you don't know, you can tell people that you don't know. If you act like you know it and then you become panicked, it gives a wrong sense to the interviewer. Okay, anyway, that's good. That's good, Varsha, right? Varsha. And inheritance is another feature. And encapsulation. Encapsulation is something you need to know the real meaning of encapsulation. So inheritance is something that is inherited, so you're getting a legacy, right? So, and then encapsulation, what is encapsulation? Action of enclosing something in or as within a capsule. That means you're keeping everything tied together inside of something, right? So that means you're holding it inside of something. That is called encapsulation. So once you need to understand the basic meanings of these words to understand. If you understand the basic meaning of these words in English, then you can apply these same concepts onto the programming. Nothing different from the actual meaning of the word encapsulation. But in terms of technicality purpose, you need to apply, the actual definition. but the meaning is same. Since if you understand the meaning, then you apply the technicality to the meaning, then you will remember what it is. Okay. So now encapsulation. Encapsulation, you learn that it's something that is something was kept inside. And the abstraction. What is abstraction meaning? Let us see the meaning of abstraction. It means it is hiding, showing the essentials, and hiding something not required. So the quality of dealing with ideas rather than events, a freedom from representation of qualities in art. So that means you are showing the essential features, presenting the essential features to the world, and you're hiding the unnecessary details to the world. So we don't show all the skills that we have. We'll show our skills whenever it is needed. So Java is nearly like that. So that way, I can say it is a simulation for a human or any object in the world. So all the features are there for most of us. Like, we have polymorphic behaviors, we are inherited something, we have encapsulation. That means we bind up some information with us and we don't delete it. We use it whenever we need it. And abstraction is something you hide it when you want to show, you'll show, right? So that is the qualities of object-oriented principles. And we already learned what is a class, object, instance, method, message parsing. Message parsing is nothing but you calling a method from a different method. It's called message parsing. That means it's called messaging. So you write one or two methods and you're calling one method from the other method, right? You're calling one method from the other method. That means you have method A, method B. You're calling method B from method A. It's called message parsing or message passing. That way you communicate between two different objects. So you can pass an object or you can pass a parameter. So you don't know the details yet, don't worry about it. So right now we'll come to a point, once we learn the definition of class and once you learn the object, then we come to know that what is an object and how you create an object. So classes in Java, how do you create a class in Java, right? You have a public class dog, right? A simple example. So you need to have a class name as dog, and this file has to be named as dog. If this is a public, this has to be a public class if you are storing this as a dog, right? Public class dog, and you have declared properties, and you have methods that you can perform. So as a dog, what are the operations can dog perform? Barking, it can hungry, and it can sleep. If it is a car, what do you do? Car will have properties like number of tires, front wheel drive or right wheel drive, and what are the different methods you can perform on a car? Drive, take a stop, or take a U-turn. All these are methods of the car. So that's how you define a car or any class. So when you define a bank account, what are the properties that you can have in bank account? Account name, account number, money, all those properties.
Yeah, money, checking accounts, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll come to the different accounts type when it comes to inheritance. Right, when you go to inheritance, we can talk about it. The base class will have the default properties like account name and everything. But when you have multiple types of accounts, how can you define them? That will come into inheritance. That means we'll hire some properties from the superclass based on certain properties. You can provide the difference between different types of accounts. But right now you are understanding how to create a class. So when you are developing some application, so I'm trying to develop an application for solving the issues of bank account. So bank account, that means the first thing that I need to create, this is called modeling, object modeling, right? Object modeling means you are creating an application. For that, you need to identify who are the users and how the users will interact with the application and what are the functions as a user you're going to perform. And if you're performing those operations, on whom you're going to perform the operations. So if it is a bank account, my bank, I have to perform certain operations on my bank account. The operations will be withdraw, deposit, transfer, something like that, right? Transfer is something, withdraw and deposit comes together. So these are the three operations that you can perform on a bank account. So basically you declare a class called bank account, and the bank account will have three different methods: withdraw, deposit, and transfer. Okay, and you guys read the content, otherwise you forget and at least this weekend, you use it effectively so that when you come back to the class tomorrow, you don't forget. And local variables. What are the local variables? Variables are like declared inside the methods or the constructors, or the blocks are called local variables. Yesterday we talked about it. Yesterday we talked about, right? Yesterday we talked about this int grade is a local variable. Because this cannot be accessed outside of this method. This is called, this is void method, so we don't need to return anything. So int grade equal to 5, right? This is a local variable, so you can use inside of your method. You can use this inside of your method, not outside. Okay. And then instance variables. We talked about instance variables. When do you use instance variable? Instance variables you declare here at the class level. You have to create an instance like this to access those variables. So you create an instance to operate on this parameter, on these properties. That's called instance variable. Class variables. We talked about class variables yesterday. When you declare this as a static, this value, this particular property is available across all the methods of all the static methods of the class. Static meaning it is class level, right? That means entire class can use it. Like if a class of students, if there are 100 students in a class, right? The roll number can be a static in a class. Roll number can be a static in a class, but student will have its own roll number. But the student will have a student number. At the same time, class will have a number of students, right? Number of students can be increased when a student is joining the class. So if there are 10 students, tomorrow 11th student come into the class, I will increment my class size. So you have to declare that property in the class. You can declare that as a static. That means, if you want to find total number of people in the class, they use static. And also, like sometimes people say, oh, they got like 1,000 hits on this website, right? On YouTube, right? On YouTube, there are 1,000 hits. There are 5,000 hits or million hits on this particular server. How do they calculate? Is because one particular application is running there, and there is one environment. Inside the environment, there is one particular variable that is declared as a class variable, that is static variable, and whenever you hit that application, they increment the static variable number so that you know that total number of students interacted, total number of people who are accessing the website can be find that way. Can be, okay? So static variables are the class variables. Static variables are the class variables. And even if you don't understand, just remember. So how do you remember 1, 2, 3? These are a meaning for the numbering system. Like if somebody tells you like 1 comes before 2, 2 comes before 3, 4 comes after 3, you have to follow these rules, right? So similarly, these rules are defined for this programming language. So you have to follow these instructions to write the program. And now that we learned a constructor, we learned a class and an object. And once we learn a class and object, then now we learn variables. What are the different types of variables that we have? And once we learn the different types of variables, now the next step is to learn what is a constructor. A constructor is a method, but it will have the same name as the class name, right? I have a public class puppy, and then you see this, you have a public puppy. The difference between method and a constructor is there is no return type for the constructor. If you see this method here, yesterday I explained, so this is the return type. Void means no values will be returned. In case if you go to this method, it's a void too. So whenever you see a method, you say public static void method. So this method is not static. if you want to access this method, you need to create an instance of the class to call the method, because this is a non-static method. This is a static method. A static void main method can call the static method. Those are the rules that you need to remember as well. So now I have a class, I'm trying to explain constructor. Constructor is a method that will not have a return type, and it will have the same name as the class. And we use this constructor to create an instance of the object. So you can use a constructor to create an instance. How to create an instance? When you say create instance, you use class name, object name, new operator, class name. This is how you create an instance. Class name, object name equal to new class name. This is how you create an object. And then once you create the object, you can set the parameters to it. So now I created a constructor here, creating an object. You learn how to create an object. This is a constructor, how you can create a constructor. Public, no return type, name, and you can have different types of constructors. One is either you can have parameterized constructor. These are called parameters of the method. When you see the method, right, when you declare a method here, this is a method. If something is passed in between brackets, that is called parameters. So you have a parameterized constructor or no parameter constructor. This is default constructor, and this one is parameterized constructor. So if you read the theory part of it, you'll understand how to write a constructor. So what is the use of constructor? So when you have a default constructor like this, so we are calling student3 equal to new student, right? So that is a basically default constructor. Even if you don't define a constructor, it will still automatically will be called. It is directly going to the student. So I can actually define a constructor here, public student, right? I'm just showing like what will happen if I call the constructor when I call it. Inside constructor, right? Line number 66. Okay, inside a constructor, because I called how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4 times I called new. So this is, whenever you call this one, it is going here, right? Now what I'll do, this is a static variable, right? I was talking about static variable. I'll increment static variable. If I say write total number equal to 1, I'll print. I was talking about what is a static variable versus instance variable, right? Now I'm creating an instance. This is class variable, but you can still call using object. Is it a total number? Yeah, total number. You can call the same thing with a direct class also. I'm trying to show the difference between instance variable versus static variable. Okay. I cannot access any of these properties directly from the class. If I want to print, right, it's giving compilation error because you cannot call a property of a class directly using class name. You need to create an instance and call it. Right? If you want to call it, I can call it like this. So you can call a class variable like a static variable like this. And if you see the warning here, the static field should be accessed in a static way. This is a warning, but not an error. That means you can still use the object to access the static parameters, static variables, but you have static variables and it's better to use a class name to access that particular static variable. Okay, now take time. Let's compile. Let's run. See, inside constructor, this is 1. Inside constructor is 2, 3. So this static variable is increased in between multiple objects. It doesn't care as long as you call constructor. Since it's a global variable, I can say it's a global variable for all the methods because it's a class level. Any object can increase the value, right? So we use this one for common purposes across the instances. If we have like 1,000 students, when you create 1,000 students, you can always increment this number so that the class will know the total number of students of the class, something like that. So that is the difference. If you see 444, but the date we printed from this class only in the third one. Okay. Any questions? Any questions between a class and an object and static variable versus local variable versus instance variable? Today I explained about it. So I want you guys to understand the differences. If you guys don't know, if you don't understand in the class, if you're hesitant to ask me, you can always YouTube it. You can find the more details. And then when you come back to class tomorrow, you can always ask me if you have any doubts, or else message me in the group. These are my doubts and I can clarify you guys when you come for class tomorrow. Okay, now I'm going back again. So we have seen the constructor, default constructor, that means no parameterized constructor here, so that it's called. So the other question I have is that what is the difference between parameterized constructor? So you can have any number of parameters in the constructor. So you cannot use the same method, right? Duplicate method student type found in the class. So I'm going to create int, maybe a string. I'll pass string. Hello, string message, right? String message total. I'm going to print. Right? When I do this, I'm seeing some errors here. I'm seeing some errors. The error is this one, right? The constructor student is undefined. See, the important thing in any interview is, right, if you don't define these two, you don't have any compilation issues, right? If you don't define any, you're not seeing any errors. But if I do this, right, if I do this, then no issues, no compilation issues. But when I create a parameterized constructor and if I don't define no parameter constructor, I get into a problem. So if you're creating a constructor student, right? If you're creating a constructor student, then if you're using constructor, This one, right? So then you have to use this way. Ignore. Then no issues. What I mean to say is the point that you need to remember when you have a parameterized constructor, then you explicitly have to define a default constructor. Default constructor means no parameter constructor. Otherwise, you'll get into a compilation issue. People will ask this in the interview questions. Okay. If you want to use a default construct, then you have to define it. But I don't know how much you guys know right now, the difference between a default constructor and constructor. If you guys don't read anything, you mean whatever you heard so far may not be able to, you may not be able to understand. So you have default constructor and parameterized constructor. And when you define a parameterized constructor, if you don't have a default constructor, you may not be able to use new constructor without parameters. That's what it means. Okay. So we talked about constructors. What is the use of constructors? We are able to create an instance. For creating an instance, we are using constructors. The next step is that if we want to, once you create an instance like this new constructor, then you're calling a variable name or a method name. So we have already seen that once you create an instance, you can access the variables or the methods of that particular class using the object. So what are the next step using constructors? So you can also assign values to the variables of the class. So a class will have variables, and when you create an instance, the same variable people call as property, right? What are the properties of Ram? But when you say student, what are the variables of that particular class? Or what are the properties of that particular class? So when you create an instance of the student, you get student one. Now that student one has certain properties, you can assign the parameters, you can assign the values through constructors. So Java default provides for each property, there is a set and get method. So that means is an object means, if you want to carry some data with you, like it's like a box, you're creating an object and then you're setting a value to it. So that if somebody asks you, like my parents put me a name Ram, right? So now if somebody wants to call me, they know my name. So if my bank account, the bank application knows my name, if they get my first name, last name, and everything like that, right? So last name and first name can be retrieved using the get and setter methods of a Java class. So how to create a setter and getter methods? What is the advantage of creating a setter and getter methods? So now I'm creating a new class called student here. Creating public static void main is default. I need for everything. Right now, there is no constructor here. So public student is here. Right, public student is here. This is int, so it has to be int. So before we just talked about int and string. I mean, we just saw this. The difference is that, you know, if you want to measure certain things, right? Measuring data. For counting, you use numbers, right? We use numbers. So for that, Java program has data type called int, long, double, float. For names, we use alphabets, right? Alphabets. So we can say that as a characters, right? Character or string. String is nothing but set of characters. So we need to understand these data types to use them. A character means a single character. String means multiple character, right? Multiple character. Char and string. And then integer means without numbers, like without it's minus, it is without decimals. Okay, I don't remember exact size of it. And then long means is bigger than an integer. It's a 64-bit, right? So we can see that one later, but right now I'm trying to tell you, in case of numbers, we use int, long, double, float. For names, we use alphabets. It can be single character or multi-character. It can be set of characters. And string is a multiple characters. So now I'm trying to initialize here, right? I'm trying to initialize the roll number of a student. How I'm gonna, when I'm creating a student, new student, right? So if we don't define this one, it will give a compilation error. We already talked about it. But now I'm going to specify one, right? Maybe I should give student one so that two. Student 4. Right, student 5. Now I can print what I'm going to print, student 1 dot roll number. Right, I'm going to change this one to 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, I'm saving it. I'm going to run this one. One, two, three, four, 5. Right? So that means what we do is we are initializing the values to this particular variable that is declared in the class using a constructor. This is called constructor. Right? This is called constructor. We are initializing the value using constructor to the variable here. Okay? Now, the same thing you can do in a different way. So I have roll number. I'm going to generate source, generate getters and setters. Right? Setters and getters. So this I can also write like this, right? Public int get roll number, something like that. But it has the same meaning. You can generate the same thing using IDE in Eclipse, right? If you right click, source, generate getters and setters. This method will, when you select this one, right now it's already written. So if I declare a name, right? If I declare a name, source, generate getters and setters, select name. Okay. Now I can define one more constructor to show the difference. Right, it will take parameter as name2. Student 6, 7, 10, right? Something I'm giving. I don't remember any names. Hope this is making sense to you guys, okay? If you tick shift tab, it will go back this way. And it's not filled with the bracket. So what will happen right now is, because I'm declaring this way, if I call student dot right roll number, one dot name. Right, this will be 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm trying to show here is that you can use constructor to assign values to the instance variables. These are even instance variables. These are not static variables. So now I'm running this one. The core Java is very important, right? So focus on it. So student, oh, it's 1. Sorry, it has to be. You see this one? Because we are calling student 1 here. There is no name, but you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But here 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are there. But if you call 6, let me do this for the same thing for 6. Six, 7, 8, 9. Right? From source 6 and 7, you have values. But student, this one doesn't have name. This one has name, right? So the next one is, now we created get and set. I want to show you guys like how you can use the same get and set, right? So I created for the first 5 statements, I didn't set the names, correct? So now I'm going to use student one dot set right one. So these steps are very important to understand. Normally, if you know how to set a value and get a value from Java object, then you know enter Java easily. So if you don't understand how to set and get use constructor, then you'll not learn Java so quick. Okay, now I have roll number set. Now but I'm not using constructor. So to set the name for it, I'm using the set method to set the value. But when I'm printing it, earlier these first 5 as null values. That means there are no values for these properties. Now I am creating a Java application. Set 1, set 2, set 3, 4. That means either you can use this way or you can also do similarly. Get name. Right? This one has same meaning. So we learned so far is that how to create a constructor and how to initialize the properties of that particular instance using the constructor, and how to retrieve those parameters, how to retrieve those properties using that object that you created using the constructor. And then we created getter and setter methods for the particular properties of the class, and then we know how to set a value to the property and get a property using the particular method of the instance. So very, very important thing that hope you guys understood. If you guys don't understand, you guys can again listen to the video and then read these things. It explains everything here. All these examples are same. It's covering the entire thing. Okay. Now, data types. I explained you guys primitive data types, like when maybe I can talk about this tomorrow. If this is too much for you guys, I want you guys to read the entire thing here and read the definitions, right? Read the definitions and come back to. I want you guys to read this one before coming to the class. Okay. After completing the basic syntax and object classes, and I want you guys to read the entire thing. I want you guys to read one by one and tell me how much you did not understand, how much you understand, right? Right? So I want you guys to continue to read this weekend. Use your time to continuous, preparation. Complete. I think you can complete until here. You can complete until arrays. If you read it thoroughly, you can easily get it. That's not a big deal at all. I want you guys to complete until arrays. Then I'll also touch base everything. I'll also touch base tomorrow, but I want you guys to read until arrays so that we can learn this programming language so quick, so that you will be able to program very quick. If you guys don't read tonight and come back to the class tomorrow without reading this one, I cannot help. It will delay the process of learning and teaching too. Okay, guys. Happy Saturday evening, and I'm taking a break. See you guys later. Any questions?
Yeah. Like, are you gonna send the link to like watch the class again?
Yeah, I'm gonna send it right away.
Okay. All right.
But any doubts right now?
Nope.